Hello once again, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another episode of Observation Conversations. And happy October. It is finally October. We're getting into the spooky season. And as the fall weather approaches, I'm sitting here with my host, Jonathan. How are you today?
I'm very good.
Yeah, so, Halloween is right around the corner. We're starting to get some spooky vibes as the leaves fall, and to kind of kick off that spooky spirit, we just watched Venom: Let There Be Carnage.
Yes.
Not a horror movie by any means. In fact, it's only like PG-13, but it seemed relevant. It seemed pertinent.
Yeah, it's kind of a darker, in tone superhero property. So
yeah. So when did you watch it? Because I just got out of the theater like an hour ago.
Yes, I actually didn't see it long ago either myself. I just saw it yesterday afternoon. So it's still pretty fresh in my mind as well.
Yeah, and then you also saw the first Venom, right?
Yes, I also saw that in theaters when that came out back in 2018.
Yeah, I never saw the first Venom. I've seen clips of it from YouTube. I knew the plot going in. I knew all the characters. But I think the one thing I wasn't expecting was kind of the tone of the movie and kind of the relationship between Eddie and Venom. That was really unusual for me. That was really kind of chaotic and weird, and at times uncomfortable. I don't know how did you feel about it?
Well, I'm doubly fascinated to hear your thoughts on this movie then, because we haven't discussed Venom: Let There Be Carnage at all before beginning this episode, so we have no idea where each other is at in terms of our impressions of the movie. But I'm doubly interested to hear what you think about it as someone who hasn't seen the first movie, because for me, after having seen the first movie, it's there are definitely similarities and overlapping elements that carried over from the first movie that I identified in this one, but you haven't been influenced by that at all. So this was your first exposure to it. So I'll say this to answer your question. I thought Venom: Let There Be Carnage, and this is in our non-spoiler section. Of course, we'll get into all the spoilers after we give our scores. But I think this movie, Let There Be Carnage, was fine. I think that this movie was, this is the number I kept getting stuck on coming back from the theater. This is a quintessential 5 out of 10. Maybe I'd give it a 6, just because there were some parts there were a few standout elements I did quite appreciate. But in general, this movie, I think, really had to set itself apart from the first one, because while a lot of people did like the first one and appreciated certain elements of that first Venom film that did set it apart from, kind of your more mainstream fare, obviously, MCU stuff, DCU stuff, etc., just by every objective standard, it wasn't particularly good. Particularly when it came to the antagonist. The villain of that movie was very weak, and it felt like, Tom Hardy, who was a phenomenal actor, one of my absolute favorites in the business today. It felt like he was he wasn't really doing anything particularly special with his Eddie Brock.
He feels like the dude in Big Lebowski, where it's like everything is just happening to him and he's doing his best to keep up, and he just kind of looks like shit the entire time.
and even that may be putting it kindly. He's kind of aimless and kind of pointless.
So dopey, honestly.
I think
weird
that's
to say about Tom Hardy, who many consider to be like one of the sexiest men alive.
Oh, absolutely.
And he's just like super dopey and like kind of awkward and sweaty. It's like, he rides a cool motorcycle, but like
Yeah, sexy and charismatic, two elements that are completely
completely
unaddressed
from
in
this
his
character,
his take on Eddie Brock. So there were parts that I appreciated about that first Venom film, but I couldn't in good conscience give it above an average 5 out of 10. And I think that this was an improvement on it, but it was a very incremental improvement. I think that this movie needed to do a lot more to elevate this Venom property above what was set up in that initial film. And while it was certainly a movie, and there were certainly parts that were entertaining, if the first Venom was like a 4 out of 10, this is only a 6 out of 10. So I thought it was fine. I don't regret seeing it, but it's one of those movies where you're coming out of the theater and you feel a little hollow. You feel a little empty.
Yeah.
It's not the kind of movie that will leave a strong impression with me. So that was my overall non-spoilers take on it.
Yeah, I definitely have to agree to it. I think the number I settled on was also like a 6 out of 10. And that was from just not having seen the first one.
Mm-hmm.
It was a short movie. It was like 90 minutes.
Yes.
And it felt kind of rushed. I feel like it could have been a little bit longer, but there was like a lot happened and also like barely anything happened at the same time.
Yeah.
It's really weird. Like I can't really describe it any other way than weird. Yeah, I like stood up from the theater and it's like, okay. And I left and like that was it.
No, I definitely agree with your take.
Like aside from the one thing that we can't cover in the non-spoiler section. Which I'm sure we'll dedicate a whole like half hour this episode just about that. But
without a doubt, yeah, there is a friend of ours mentioned in regards to this movie that a big portion of our discussion today would be about implications, and I think that he put it very well because there is definitely a very big spoiler that, as you said, we can't talk about just now, but we will soon, that I'm sure we will be discussing in depth because I think it's very telling not just about the trajectory of this character, but about a much wider world, shall we say. So we'll get to that. But yes, to your point, I very much agree with your take that I think this movie is weird, and in ways good and bad. It's definitely off the beaten path, which is an element that I appreciate. That was I think probably the biggest thing I liked from the first movie was that it definitely felt like its own thing, even if that is, for both better and worse. And I think that this movie definitely embraced that even more, which I appreciate. The good things about it were, and this is actually one area where I think I disagree with you, is I really liked how short the movie was. This movie was a tight 95 minutes, and that I think is perfect for this story because honestly, I can't imagine, nor do I particularly want to imagine, a 2.5 hour cut of this movie.
Oh yeah, no, I'm saying like at most an additional 30 minutes, and that's probably just because I didn't see the first one. Because a lot of it is like I want a little bit more familiarity with kind of Venom and Eddie, and like there's I can't say too much until we declare spoilers, but there's some stuff that I feel could have been explored a little bit more. So like an extra half hour would have benefited. I mean, the fact that it was 90 minutes wasn't bad, but I think for me, I would have liked more information and less chaos.
I think that's very fair.
Note that I did not say the word in the title because I respect myself. I wish there was less chaos in the movie and just a little more direction, I think.
Yeah. So
direction.
Yeah, and a big part of why I really appreciated the 90-minute runtime is because I feel like for a lot of superhero movies and a lot of superhero stories now, that there's this pressure to go longer and longer. You know, we've seen this especially with Avengers Endgame. There was a fan campaign saying that this movie needs to be at least 3 hours, and sure enough, it was 3 hours and 1 minute. So, you know, these movies, you know,
well, I thought they also did that. So the MCU would be like an even number of
which I mean,
like 3,000 minutes, I think.
Yeah, which is definitely clever, and honestly, I think if the fans had never said anything, it probably still would have been 3 hours, because that's just a movie with a lot of content in it. But you know, there has been this movement in the past decade where these superhero movies, it's not even enough to be 2 hours. You know, the expectation is 2 hours 15, 2 hours 30, now going into 3 hours. And I liked how this movie kind of pushed back on that a little bit and said, you know, hey, it is still possible in this day and age to tell an action-packed story that just knows what it is and is not trying to be anything more than what it is, and it could be concise in 90 minutes, you know. And I think that was definitely one aspect I appreciated. Another pro, Woody Harrelson as Cletus Cassidy. I think that I think he did a really good job, especially all things considered. You know, I think that the writing was the writing was not a big improvement over the first film, which is to say, you know, mediocre at best. But you know, Woody Harrelson is Woody Harrelson, and he was just hamming it up and, you know, chewing scenery every scene he was in. So, and no bozo wig from the post-credit scene of the first one.
Yeah,
so that's good.
I still disagree with the red hair. Seeing Woody Harrelson with red hair is just kind of weird to me. But the fact that it was like not like a white man afro.
Anything but that. So
for sure.
Yeah, so definitely that was another pro. And also I liked how geographically coherent this movie is. You know, this wasn't like some globetrotting story. The whole movie is just set in and around San Francisco, and we're not going to a bunch of secondary locations, which is another thing that I appreciate, just kind of because it adds to that concise feeling.
Yeah.
You know, we're not branching out and going to all these different places, which obviously, you know, the movies that do that well, more power to them. But for this, they knew what they were trying to do, and they just kept it in this very self-contained runtime and very self-contained environment. So I appreciated that. But I think that in terms of the outstanding pros, that's about it for me. I think that the odd couple chemistry that clearly the first movie was trying to establish and capitalize on, I think that this movie almost was a step back from that. I think the odd couple stuff did not work particularly well. You know, there's, you know, the relationship between Eddie Brock and Venom is, it's.
I want to get into that. But first, I think we should declare the end of this non-spoiler section. You gave it a 6 out of 10.
I did.
I gave it a 6 out of 10. Should people go watch this movie?
I think that if you've seen the first one, I think if you haven't seen the first one, then honestly you don't need to see this. You probably don't care anyway. I think if you've seen the first one and it didn't completely put you off seeing more of this character, then check it out. I think that I'm very glad that this movie did as well as it's done at the box office. It's been, I think, the biggest box office opener yet in the pandemic era, which is fantastic. You know, it was great to see the theater, even, you know, my theater, this is, you know, 2.5, almost 3 weeks after it first came out, and my theater was almost packed. You know, it was very lively. Yeah,
mine had like maybe 10 other people.
Yeah, which, I mean, for a movie that's, you know, almost 3 weeks post-release is very impressive. So I'm very glad that this movie has done well at the box office, and it's, you know, been a part of the, you know, the resurgence of movie-going post-pandemic. And it's kind of the tip of the spear. But do I feel like you need to see it in a theater? Not especially, you know. I would say the only reason to see it in a theater, if you already meet the other qualifications I mentioned, is because, frankly, Sony is not. Sony movies don't typically pop up on streaming. You know, like they're very hit and miss when they're putting out movies on streaming. I don't think the first Venom was ever on streaming. So unless you have, I think Stars is where, or one of the premium channels, you know, is where Sony puts their movies out. You know, it might be a hassle to find unless you're willing to rent it.
I didn't even think this one is on streaming yet.
Like it's not going
to be streamed until it's out of theaters. So
and most of the Sony movies aren't. So unless you have, whichever of the premium channels that Sony does put their stuff onto, then, it might be cheaper than renting it. But even then, I think that, if you can wait, I think wait. I don't think you're missing too much seeing this one in a theater.
Yeah,
Obviously,
there's no pressing reason to go watch this movie.
exactly.
If you're dying to see it, like, go see it, I guess. But
Yeah.
like, if you're just a casual fan of Venom, you're not missing much.
Yeah, and in particular, if you're a big MCU movie fan, and if you're wondering, because this is a Marvel character, if this is a must-see thing, definitely.
I would say no.
Yeah, don't go in expecting that. This is definitely not that. Just like the first film wasn't that. So, if you're a Marvel fanatic, don't think that Venom 2 is a must see. But that said, it's certainly not the worst superhero film we've gotten in the last couple of years. So, check it out. It's a fun time. But definitely just kind of a turn off your brain and have fun kind of movie.
Yeah.
So, yes, but as you said, I think we can now shift into the spoiler section. So for everyone out there who hasn't seen the movie, be warned. Everything is now fair game. So, Venom.
This was the movie where Venom and Eddie broke up.
Yes. Yeah. So, so this is the first thing that I think we should talk about is, I feel like, in terms of the Venom-Eddie relationship, there was virtually no growth from the first movie to now. I feel like all of the same beats with the odd couple stuff that we were hitting in this movie, we had already seen and we had already established in the first movie. In the first movie, obviously, it's Venom coming into contact with Eddie for the first time, and they have to establish these ground rules. Venom just can't eat whoever he wants. And by the end of the movie, they establish a pact that they're going to try to live together, and try to live with each other and help each other and maybe even do some good. And in this movie, it's the exact same thing. They're just back to squabbling and, being at cross purposes. And
except they're not even like going out and fighting crime, or at least like Eddie doesn't want to.
Yeah.
That's really only Venom wants to do that. Which is weird, because when they do split up, Venom doesn't like go out and start munching down on bad guys. He like goes to a fucking rave, kills like 3 guys just by inhabiting their bodies without eating.
Yeah.
And then ends up in Mrs. Chen.
Yeah.
Like that.
Much.
So that was weird.
Yeah.
It seemed abusive to me. The relationship seemed very abusive, which was not what I was expecting. It was like kind of uncomfortable to watch.
Yeah, there's definitely, there's definitely, I think, a conclusion that you can draw for that. And yeah, I mean, I really didn't feel like we had established anything new about the relationship between these two. And I mean, as you said, I mean, when Venom does, leave Eddie, he doesn't even go do exactly what he said he wanted to do this whole time, which was go eat the brains of bad guys, which, I mean, it's not like that's some red line that was never crossed in the first movie. Venom ate more brains in the first movie than he did in this one. And, and I think, and this is another thing we'll talk about, I think that's a factor of it being PG-13, and another thing that really kind of handicapped the movie, which is the rating. But, it felt like we were just reheating a lot of the same beats from the first movie. And honestly, this is what I was thinking about it. I think that there is a really good Venom movie here if you took maybe like the first act of the first movie and then the second 2 acts of this movie. And if you just combined those together, you could have a really good Venom movie. The first Venom and Eddie interaction, and then leading into this.
What was that first act?
Well, that was pretty much just that. It was establishing how Venom, came to be inside of Eddie, and
just like how he crashed to Earth and
exactly. Eddie, he was investigating this, I think it's called the Life Foundation or some.
It was like a company that was experimenting on these
evil sci-fi corporation, and he was investigating them, and that's how, and then that's how the symbiote finds him. And just those first interactions with the two of them and establishing the ground rules. And then you can just cut to, the action with here, Eddie's meeting with Cletus Cassidy, and, everything else plays out as normal. That is a good Venom movie right there, but you still have a very disappointing back half of the first movie and a mostly aimless first half of this movie. And, it just feels like we've spent 2 movies establishing what could easily have been set out in one.
Yeah. Yeah, that is one of the things I was thinking. Was like, I feel like this would have been more cohesive if it was, instead of 2 separate movies, just one slightly longer movie. And again, I don't know if that was from just kind of poor writing or the fact that I hadn't seen the first one. But I feel like it would have made more sense because, like, from what it sounds like in the first movie, they kind of dealt with the same problems where it's like, how do we like get along and cooperate and cohabitate? And I feel like that's where they should have started this film, instead of like constantly being at each other's throats, seeing them like truly symbiotic, kind of helping each other out, instead of Venom just like whining about everything all the time, and then actively getting in Brock's way. And like if they started like that, and then you could have the situation with the his ex getting engaged again, and that makes him really sad, and like Venom is trying to cheer him up, but I thought the scene where he's driving the motorcycle and he like low-key wants to kill himself and Venom won't let him, like that was pretty powerful, or it could have been if it wasn't like a PG semi-comedy movie. But if you have that, and like Eddie is kind of dealing with this trauma, and maybe he's like, I just need to be alone with my thoughts. Like I can't really kind of grieve with someone else constantly in my head, or it can be some kind of other conflict. I don't know. And they go their separate ways. And you can still have that plot point, but the fact that like they started out still at each other's throats, means like by the end of the movie it feels like nothing's really been resolved, because they end up at the same place as the first movie. So then that they'll be back at each other's throats pretty soon.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I just want to echo what you said entirely. It felt like there was really no evolution to their relationship from the end of the first movie throughout this movie. It was the same old conflicts being, reheated over again. And, I was really hoping, because I mean, there are such ample opportunities to really do some interesting stuff and have funny moments with the two of them working together, genuinely trying to be partners, but it felt like but instead of doing that, it was just the same odd couple, if only they could get along, being at cross purposes again. And I feel like it would have been much better if they would have just started off trying to genuinely get along and be partners. And obviously they'll still have their own objectives and they won't always get along perfectly, but make an effort.
Being able to work, because like the problem is that their kind of odd couple relationship is constantly compared to the relationship between Cassidy and Carnage. And it's weird because they just kind of, as soon as he got a hold of Carnage, they were like all of a sudden working together perfectly. And it was like, you scratch my back, I scratch yours. Help me go kill this guy, and then I'll help you kill that other guy. And it just works perfectly. And like that's what Eddie and Venom should have been, not trading murders, but like kind of more cooperative. And then during the final battle, you see the two of them at odds. And Dan is saying like, "Oh, they're not symbiotic, but you guys can be symbiotic." And the only thing that changed was Eddie said, Eddie was basically like, "Oh shit, if I don't get Venom back, I'm gonna die because I can't fight this other symbiote as a human."
Yeah.
And two, he was like, "We can do it. We can be a team." And then all of a sudden they were like a team, even though it wasn't really a matter of cooperation. It was like, Venom taking over to fight Carnage.
Quite literally telling us and not showing us that moment of character growth.
Yeah, I feel like if there's some kind of skill set that they had given Eddie and not Venom, and then like that could have worked together where they're constantly like kind of shifting between their two forms in battle, or made it so like Venom's not that smart, but really wants to catch this guy, and Eddie's like really smart, so he like helps solve the mystery. But instead of like Venom kind of did everything in this movie.
Yeah. If it could have been more like a Bruce Banner Hulk situation, then that probably would have been better. Yeah.
Yeah, that would have been really cool.
Oh, absolutely.
Or like a buddy cop. They could have done a buddy cop. Like
honestly,
bad cop.
That's what I thought this movie was going to be coming up. After having watched the trailers, is I thought this was going to be exactly what they kept referencing throughout the movie, which was a more lethal protector kind of thing, where the two of them are working together and trying, however imperfectly, to be kind of neighborhood heroes in that sense. But it wasn't a buddy cop thing. It was. It was just, I feel like nothing really was gained from the beginning of this movie to the end in terms of their relationship. So I think that was my first big problem with it, was that it felt like we were just reheating a lot of those odd couple plot points from the first movie. The second thing that I want to mention, and I think we should talk about, is Eddie Brock himself, because, that was one area where in the first movie, you're just watching it and you're wondering, what exactly is Tom Hardy trying to do here? Because it's not really clear what the appeal of this character would be to an actor of his caliber. It's not like Eddie Brock is that clever or that cool or that much of an action hero. He's just kind of this very passive, one-dimensional guy. He's supposed to be an investigative journalist, but he's not good at that at all. And he just kind of sucks at most things. He sucks at his job, sucks at his relationships, sucks at being a hero.
I mean, he's a total loser in the entire movie.
Yeah, and I mean, it just, I had a hard time understanding what the appeal was of this character to a Tom Hardy. But I thought that, hey, in this movie, they've gotten a new director, they've streamlined the writing team, and now he's going to be a producer, so he'll have a more active role in shaping what the story is going to be. So, maybe now this is where he's really going to show us some more of what he can do, and why he wants to be Venom. But, again, in many ways, I mean, maybe I won't say it's worse than the original, but I don't feel like it improved in any great way, and I think it really just serve to highlight more of the flaws of the Eddie Brock character and why he just feels like such a bystander in his own movie, which is
that's why I drew the comparison to Big Lebowski, but in that movie it was very intentional, and in that movie, like, the dude had a very clear goal, which was to replace his carpet. In this, Eddie doesn't really have that much of a goal. It's like, he's trying to stop Venom from ruining his life just because he doesn't want his life to be a mess. He's trying to, like, he's not like really actively trying to get the story or do a really good job so he can be put back to the spotlight. It's like he's just kind of doing it. I don't know, maybe that was an issue with the performance or the writing, but like, He doesn't seem very motivated in kind of
No,
any area.
no, I've heard this is the criticism that I've heard of the Eddie Brock character, and it's one that I agree with. That Eddie Brock feels like this version of Eddie Brock feels like the kind of character who, when he's not on screen about to experience the events of the next scene, he would just be like sitting in a corner, like watching television and not doing anything.
He'd be like sitting on a couch.
Yeah, like there's no. It doesn't feel like there's really any internal life to Eddie Brock, and I mean, I guess it's I get it. It's hard to have an internal life when there's literally always a second voice inside your head. But
then like focus on that, like make that more apparent in the movie. Have that be the catalyst that causes them to split up.
Yeah, he comes off as very one-dimensional, and I mean, it's really odd seeing. Again, an actor like Tom Hardy, I mean, to say he's wasted in this movie is a little harsh, but I mean, I don't think you need a Tom Hardy to play this part at all.
Yeah.
And it's definitely, barely scratching the surface of what he could provide to a role like this. Which is even more surprising when you consider the director of this movie is Andy Serkis, the king of motion capture. And honestly, again, I mean, I couldn't tell you anything that was particularly outstanding about the motion capture CGI in this movie at all.
Or just the direction in general. Like, Andy Serkis is great, but like the one thing I was thinking when I was watching this movie is like, damn, Andy Serkis loves his crane shots.
Yes.
Everything was like nothing was really that grounded.
Yeah.
Which I think also could have helped. Like you're dealing with these kind of weird alien creatures and like you don't really know fully what they can do. The scene where Carnage like hacks the internet by plugging its tentacles into the Ethernet port. That makes no goddamn sense.
Yeah, that was so stupid.
If you're gonna break reality that much, like one of the things you can do is literally ground the camera into the perspective of other people and how they're kind of viewing these things. But I don't know. It was just strange. It was a strange film.
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, I think we may be arriving at a point where we're gonna have to admit that maybe Andy Serkis just isn't cut out to be a director, because he also did a couple years ago, he did that Jungle Book movie for Netflix, not the Disney one, but the Netflix one, that everyone immediately forgot about, and now he's done this, and I mean, he's a great actor.
Yeah.
But directing isn't for everybody. He doesn't seem like he really has a terribly grand or unique vision for these movies.
There isn't a very sophisticated vocabulary with his directing. It's not to say that it's bad or it doesn't look good visually, but it's all very basic.
Yes.
It's all very traditional. Like the whole cathedral fight scene, like that was cool. There's some cool shots in there.
Yeah.
But the scene where like Carnage like grapples the scaffolding and holds himself up and he's like encompassed by the stained glass mirror. It's like that was an obvious shot. Like you may as well have him like nailed to the cross at that point.
Yeah. I mean, it was hardly Nolan-esque. I think it's safe to say. But yeah, I mean, as for Eddie Brock, I mean, he feels very one-dimensional, very flat. First and foremost, we should talk about this. He's supposed to be this investigative journalist, and he's terrible at it. He's literally looking at the serial killer's holding cell, which is just full of scrawlings and drawings.
Pictures? He didn't take any pictures, any drawings, any notes. Venom did everything.
He didn't take any pictures, and he couldn't even fathom what the significance of these drawings could be as he is looking at them.
Yeah.
Venom literally has to walk him through and explain why these scrawlings might be significant. If
you want to have him be like a bad reporter on purpose, make it like he used to be a great reporter and then he fell from grace.
Yeah.
And something happened and he just did really poorly for a while and he had this big string of bad luck. He's a great detective, but he just found out that his ex is now engaged. He's depressed. He is not trying very hard. He does not care. So he's staring at this wall and he's just not thinking about the implications at all. And then like Venom is trying to like take care, and maybe that plays into the relationship too, where it's like, they are used to being symbiotic, and the relationship changes in a way where Venom has to kind of take care of Eddie and do everything himself, and Venom's like, I can't do that. Literally, as a species, my point is to become symbiotic with something else.
Yeah, so throughout this movie, Eddie Brock is a pretty pathetic investigative reporter, and he's an even worse detective. The extent of his detective work throughout the movie is uncovering that, that carved little thing where, Cletus, it was Cletus plus FB Francis, Screech. Of course, obviously the cops already knew that, and so he wasn't telling them anything new. Yeah. And Detective Mulligan just tells him that, I know who FB is. I shot her, so she's dead, and that was it. So, pretty
brilliant.
Yeah, yeah. So really, Eddie Brock. I mean, it's what can you say? I mean, he's just very flat and just kind of all around a bit pathetic, and doesn't make for the most.
That's not to say the performance, right? It's not not the performance is flat, but the writing of the character is flat.
Well, I mean, it is kind of both. I mean, like I said, I you could say it's a little bit harsh to say that Tom Hardy's wasted on this character, but in many ways he is. Like none of the qualities that make Tom Hardy such an awesome actor are really on display here. Certainly not the attractiveness, certainly not the charisma.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess his American accent is decent. I guess it's like better than like Benedict Cumberbatch's when he's doing Doctor Strange. So there is that, but I couldn't tell you what Tom Hardy qualities that he's really bringing to this. Honestly, like if you were asking me what's the better Tom Hardy comic book movie performance, this or Bane from The Dark Knight Rises?
Oh, Bane for sure.
It's Bane without a doubt. It's Bane every day of the week. Yeah, and twice on Sundays.
By a football stadium.
Yeah, exactly. By the decimated remains of a football stadium. Really, Eddie Brock was, as I think, is a misfire. And honestly, and here's, I think, the greater point that I really want to hit on. I think this is going to be a pretty overarching theme of our criticisms of the movie is Sony. It's what Sony has been trying to do. Their strategy in the past few years is at once brilliant and baffling. The brilliant part was, deciding to sign this truce with Marvel so that they can include Spider-Man inside the MCU in exchange for, obviously, Sony keeps all the Spider-Man rights and, profit sharing and all that. So that's brilliant. And going into the animated stuff and doing an animated movie as brilliant as Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, brilliant, outstanding. So on the one hand, they've been, strategic geniuses in those regards. Although admittedly, maybe I shouldn't call it genius. I mean, it's pretty common sense. In the one hand, attach your most popular character to the most powerful cultural juggernaut of the decade. That's not a hard call. But like Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, that wasn't a sure thing. Like that's such a
especially
out there.
Sony Animations, the creators behind a legend such as the Emoji Movie, to then turn around and pump out Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Like really no one was expecting that. That was incredible.
Yeah, that was one thing where, you really do have to give them credit because that was a gutsy movie to make. I mean, you could definitely feel like there would be old school studio executives who would look at the story treatment for that movie and say, this is just too weird and too abstract for the average moviegoer to understand, especially considering, because again, these old school guys, they think, well, animated movies, so it's got to be, we're appealing to children primarily. Yeah. And so they're going to look at that and say, well, this is just not going, this is going to go over the heads of kids. They're not going to get it. They're not going to understand why there's 5 different Spider-Men. This is too weird. Either dial it back or don't do it. But they didn't dial it back, and they did do it. And, I mean, it was not only a box office hit, but obviously it also won a bunch of Oscars, including Best Animated Feature. So
yeah. The two things about animated movies. Kids animation can be as nuanced and as smart and as above the kids' heads as you want. As long as it is visually stimulating, they will not care. They will not give a shit. There's a reason why kids just sit in front of their iPads all day watching nonsense. It's because it's lights and colors flashing in front of their eyes.
Well, that's the thing is that, you say that, but this is what we were talking about with Space Jam and New Legacy, is that I feel like that is the takeaway that they've gotten, but it's in the complete wrong direction. They think that just because everything is bright and loud and colorful, it will stimulate children, and so they don't have to try.
No. The goal is not to make it just a bunch of stimulating lights and colors. The point is that as long as it has that, you can do a bunch of other stuff to satisfy adults, and it's still worth doing.
Exactly.
And the other thing, I cannot tell you how much I hate the stigmatism that animation is for kids. Animation is a form of cartoons, and cartoons are for children. And you can't have adult animation. If it's animated, it must be for kids. That is so terribly wrong. Also, cartoons come from literal newspaper cartoons.
Yeah.
And I've never met a child who read the newspaper. That was all adults. So you tell me where that changed, but we need more big budget kind of adult animation, or just more nuanced stuff like Spider-Verse. Because that was great, and it was hugely successful.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, it was, absolutely. I mean, I remember where I was, back in 2019 when that won the Oscar. And I mean, I can't remember the last time I actually cheered for a movie winning an Oscar, even if it's a movie I really wanted to win. But I did cheer for Into the Spider-Verse because, I mean, that was a year where, it could have been just, give it to, your usual suspects. I think that Incredibles 2 was up that year, and your usual Disney, Pixar, those movies were up that year. And honestly, if a movie like Incredibles 2 got it, fine. I mean, I saw Incredibles 2 in the theater actually, and it was good. Not as good as the first one, but it was fine.
Sure
no, definitely not as good as the first one, but it was entertaining. But Into the Spider-Verse really deserved to win and really deserved to get that recognition. And I was thrilled when it did. So, but and you're absolutely right. I mean, we've had countless examples of movies that have been both profound and very successful that have very adult themes, but are, animated and, so therefore they appeal to children as well.
Did you ever watch Avatar: The Last Airbender?
Animated?
Yeah, absolutely. That was a great example of a cartoon made for children that deals with a lot of adult sophisticated themes. A war-torn country, refugees, orphans, so much stuff.
And I wasn't even reaching into television. I was just thinking in terms of movies alone. But certainly there's even more examples in television. But I mean, how many? And obviously, the examples that always come to mind are Pixar. But I mean, it's not just Pixar. But I mean, so many of those movies. I mean, you look at Ratatouille and Up and WALL-E and the Toy Story films. And I mean, it's we've seen so many examples where you can put some really poignant and Inside Out, and the list goes on. Coco and yada yada yada, where you can put really poignant adult themes.
We could do an entire episode just listing kids animated movies.
Exactly. So I mean, there's no doubt that what you're saying is true. I mean, there are so many examples in movies and even more in television where you have really powerful, poignant adult themes packed into child-friendly adult animation packaging. But for a lot of these studio executives, you have to remember that they don't think that way. They're so far behind the curve, and when it comes to this stuff. So they do have these retrograde opinions, animation is or should be the exclusive domain of children. But I'm glad they didn't succumb to those impulses with Into the Spider-Verse, because it probably wouldn't have existed otherwise. So on the one hand, you have that. You have the Tom Holland MCU Spider-Man and Into the Spider-Verse. fantastic and brilliant. On the other hand, you have this, I believe it's the Spider-Man motion picture universe, or it's some weird acronym that doesn't work at all.
It's the Sony animated Spider-Verse, basically.
Yeah, well, I'm not talking animation. I'm talking back to the live action. You have your Venom and also your Morbius. Yeah, it's the Spider-Man.
It's the Sonyverse, I guess.
Yeah,
the Sonyverse.
Yeah, they've got some weird acronym for it, but yeah, just call it the Sonyverse, where you have this loose collection of spin-off movies revolving around Spider-Man adjacent characters, but of course not involving Spider-Man himself, because he's off over here in the MCU. And the big kickoff for this Sonyverse was Venom, and that was a very strange way to start off your Spider-Man-less Spider-Man universe, because it really seemed like Sony has not been paying attention to what's been happening with other studios in the last decade in terms of creating their replicant, or their stand-in MCUs. We've seen it most prominently with the DCU, but also Universal had their MonsterVerse that kind of fell apart. And you've had so many different properties that have tried it, and it felt like Sony was making the mistake in 2018 that Warner Brothers had gotten burned by almost hit for hit, word for word with Man of Steel 5 years earlier with in their DCU. They had the idea, well, what if we took this character, and it's not even a main character, a side character, and we gave him his own movie, because people weren't really on board with Topher Grace's version in Spider-Man 3. And we're going to take away the thing that makes this character the most interesting aspect of this character, which is his relationship with Spider-Man, and we're going to put him in this dark, gritty, grounded origin story.
Yeah,
that's the exact pitch for Man of Steel. But in at least Man of Steel had Superman. Like, that is the focal character of the DCU. Venom is just a Spider-Man villain, and he's a very popular Spider-Man villain, but it's a Spider-Man villain,
Spider-Man, yeah,
a side character who doesn't have the relationship that makes him interesting, which is his relationship with Spider-Man. And on top of that, the movie just wasn't very good. So it was very strange to see Sony walk into the exact same pitfall that we've seen a lot of these franchises fall into. And it seems like between this movie and the trailers that we've seen for Morbius, they're not even really making a great effort to course correct. This movie felt very tonally similar to the first one. And Morbius, I mean, we've talked about this before. I do not think it's at all a coincidence that it's coming out in the the movie dumping grounds that is January. No studio puts out, well, it's changing a little bit now, but the common wisdom is that studios don't put out movies they expect to do well in January. That's where you put movies that you want to get rid of quietly. You still have to release them, but
doesn't make sense. Like, why as a studio would you spend the money to make a movie that is not going to do well?
Well, that's the thing, is that I think I genuinely think, for some twisted reason, they thought that it would work, despite the obvious indications to the contrary. There's no way that they would produce that movie assuming that it would fail. They're doing it thinking that it's going to succeed, but I mean, there is nothing about it that I think is appealing or interesting, and especially after this. I mean, I think that people came back to see this because a lot of them just saw the first one and they were probably meh on it, and they thought, okay, well, they're taking another stab at it with a more well-known villain in Carnage, so I'll check this one out. And plus, obviously, I mean, we're still in this, we're still barely making it out of the pandemic kind of freeze on new releases. People are starved for content to come back out to the theater for. So
yeah, but it's also like, this movie has to have been in production for more than a year.
Oh yeah.
So like this whole series started before the pandemic. So the fact that they like had some inkling that it probably wouldn't do as well. Like, after, like, sure, you want to try to make your own like Venomverse type of thing or whatever. Sure, you do that. You create the first movie, and it doesn't do that great. So then Sony should have just said, "Hey, Marvel, we will license out the movie rights to Spider-Man. In exchange, you can make movies with this character, and we will keep 50% of the box office rights." Maybe to make it more fair, Sony, maybe they share some of their studio resources.
Yeah.
But they didn't just do that. They're like also trying to do this Venom thing, and they're spending a ton of money on this like Venomverse that doesn't really work and also like complicates things a lot.
Yeah.
And which, we'll get to, but it's just, it doesn't seem necessary or wise at all.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's just baffling the direction that they've chosen to take with it. And, it's, again, the thing that makes Eddie Brock an interesting character in the comics is his relationship with Spider-Man, or with Peter Parker. He's also this reporter at the Daily Bugle who hates Spider-Man.
Yeah.
And so that when he does, become inhabited by the Venom symbiote, Venom hates Spider-Man too. And then, they've clashed, and other times they've been friendly. But now you have Eddie Brock in a different city with no relationship to Spider-Man, and likewise Venom has no relationship to Spider-Man. So it's like, well, if you don't have that, then what does make Eddie tick? What does make Venom tick? Why should we care? And these movies have done a very muddy job of answering that question.
Eddie doesn't have a tick. He has no motivation to do anything.
And that's why I don't feel particularly motivated to find out what happens next with this version of Eddie Brock. I mean, I would be, and this obviously ties into the mid-credit scene as well. I think there's a lot of reasons why we now probably won't be seeing a Venom 3. I mean, it could happen, but I mean,
it seemed like they set that up with Pete Mulligan, like, kind of landing on his back, and then his eyes turned black with, blue corneas for some reason. Don't know what's up with that. He's like, no more monsters. But it could also be a like Doctor Strange post-credit scene too. It's like, no more sorcerers, and then we just never see him again.
Which I think they will follow up with that to some degree. But in terms of a Venom 3, I mean, I don't particularly care, and it doesn't seem like Sony is that invested in doing it either. Because we'll talk about the post-credit
instead
scene.
Of spending money to make this movie, just license out Venom along with your Spider-Man to the MCU. Yeah, and then you get free money, basically.
And that's
because they want to use their character.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is that, Morbius is on even shakier ground, because that's a very little known character. And the trailers...
that Morbius is fucking worthless.
Yeah, and it's a little known character. Frankly, like, okay, he's a vampire dude, so like vampire, like, that's not a super novel concept.
Like, what, you're gonna make some amount of money with the movie rights to this character from like making one Morbius movie, and maybe like a Sinister Six. I feel like they would make more money just by selling the movie rights of Morbius back to Marvel.
Sure, probably. I mean, if we're talking just the Morbius rights, then yeah, sure, probably. I think so. But and on top of it, the trailers have not looked good. So, are they going to now do what they did similar to this, where they try to artificially ramp up the relevance by attaching it to other things? I mean, they could.
Yeah, and the direction they seem to be going is that the MCU Spider-Man will leave the MCU and cross over into the Sonyverse, and then be fighting all these villains. Which I think would make a lot of people very upset, personally. I don't think it makes much sense to do that at all. Or he crosses over for a single movie and then returns to the MCU proper. And Sony just did that to try to give more relevance to their Sonyverse, which will promptly die out immediately.
Well, yeah.
it doesn't look good either way.
Yeah, well, I think that, I think that was something that was a real risk of being able to happen back in 2019 when Disney and Sony were on the verge of breaking up over Spider-Man, and they signed that last minute peace deal, I guess you can call it.
If I remember properly, that was because Marvel wanted a bigger slice of box office revenue, right? I think they were at like 50-50.
Yeah, I think it's the other way around. I think Sony wanted a bigger piece of the Spider-Man movies because
I thought it was Disney, because like a lot of people kind of accused Sony at first, and then like it came out that Marvel was the one asking for more money.
Well,
Disney, I guess, but I don't know. I don't.
I think both sides were getting greedy because this was obviously just coming off of Endgame, which was huge for everyone. So. This was back when I think Sony probably thought that their Sonyverse was more viable than it was. So I think both sides were getting a bit greedy there. But yeah, they had that last minute, peace deal to keep Spider-Man in the MCU for, I believe it was at least one more solo movie, the final film of the Homecoming trilogy, and then one or two more team up movies. And then they'll have to renegotiate again. But now it seems like I can't imagine Spider-Man exiting the MCU, barring a total breakdown in the relationship between Disney and Sony. I mean, it's just he's making everybody way too much money for Spider-Man to leave the MCU at this point, especially to join the Venomverse. I mean, that's
so then where does that leave the Venomverse? Like, where does the Venomverse go next? If they were like setting up this whole thing, I think at this point we should just talk about the post-credit scene.
Yeah, well,
we're already here.
Yeah, well, I do want to talk about it, but before we do, because I know that once we get onto that, we won't get off of it for a while. So
yeah,
I do want to talk about just a couple of the things that I did like about the movie itself. Starting with Woody Harrelson, I thought that he was having a lot of fun with Cletus Cassidy, which I appreciated. He was good. The writing wasn't the strongest, but he was hamming it up and chewing the scenery, and I liked his take on this psycho serial killer. And I think that he was the best Carnage that he could be. So he was definitely a high point of the movie. I already mentioned I thought the 90-minute runtime was appropriate. Just let's talk about the PG-13 thing real quick. I
wanted to bring that up because earlier we were talking about kind of animated movies being this whole, there's a stigma behind animation as it's for kids, and for a long time that was also the stigma for superheroes.
Yeah,
like superhero movies are for children. And then Deadpool came out, and that was like the first ever R-rated superhero movie, and a lot of people were like, yeah, this is great, we want more of this. And then a lot of parents were like, why was this so bad for my child to see? And it's like, damn, Karen, you should have read the fucking label on it that said rated R.
Yeah. And don't forget also Joker was huge. That was R-rated.
And like kind of grittier, more grounded superhero stories that deal with dark themes tend to do better when they have a higher, I don't know what that rating system is called, but a higher rating where they're like at least R.
Also, I could be wrong, but I think wasn't Logan R-rated too?
Yes, it was. Logan was rated R.
And that was the best Wolverine movie, certainly. One of the best X-Men movies.
So do you think Venom and Carnage should have been rated R?
Oh, hands down. Hands down.
I absolutely believe they should have been.
Oh, without a doubt. Yeah, that was, I think, most people's biggest criticism of the first movie was that the PG-13 really neuters the Venom character, because he is the lethal protector and he does eat people. And like it feels like this movie was even more bloodless than the first movie, because by the end of the first movie, Venom is killing a lot of people. He kills the turd in the wind guy. He kills a bunch of bad guys in the final showdown. Like he kills a bunch of people, and although obviously it's PG-13, you can't get blood splatters everywhere and all that. But I mean, you can definitely tell that he's eating people. In this movie, it's almost comical the lengths that they go to neuter any of the violence, like especially when it comes to Venom, but it's even worse for Carnage, because Carnage is a notoriously bloody, brutal, violent villain. And this movie, it feels like this really wasn't Carnage. This felt like it was just a generally dangerous symbiote, like Riot was from the first movie. But this wasn't Carnage. I mean, like, he'll throw some prison guards up against a wall real hard. Yeah. But it's you don't get any sense of bodily injury. You don't get any blood. He doesn't even eat people's. He eats like two people's heads off, and that's it. Like And
then you see the entire body laying on screen up to the neck, and then the frame, like the edge of the frame, just cuts off their head, and it's like, I get, like, we know what's happening. You may as well show it.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it really felt like the PG-13 just completely neutered the action of this movie, especially given the protagonist and the antagonist. I mean, this is, in my mind, as much as I was just praising Woody Harrelson, the actual Carnage symbiote, this wasn't Carnage. I mean, Carnage is going to be doing a lot more bloody violence than what we saw in this, and the PG-13, it's just. Yeah, it completely does a disservice to the story they're trying to tell, and it's even more glaring than the first movie. So, yeah, I really had a problem with it. I think that, I mean, look, I'm not saying this needs to be some crazy gore fest, but I mean, you've got to do more than this. I mean, this was just insufficient. And so, yeah, the PG-13 was a huge disservice to both Venom and Carnage. And yeah, if honestly, just go R-rated. I mean, as you were saying, we've seen these R-rated superhero and comic book movies come out and be monster successes. Deadpool, Joker, Logan. I mean, Deadpool 2. I mean, just go for it. Like, this is not rocket science. So
yeah, I would say what they should have done is go rated R, but lean away from Deadpool, drop some of the comedy stuff, and go more towards like The Boys or Invincible.
Yeah, exactly.
Where it's just like really gore, and you have like sub humor, but it's mostly pretty dark. You could have done like a buddy cop, like True Detective type of thing.
Yeah.
I think. Do you know what I think would have really helped? Is if we saw Cletus Clive's murders themselves.
Yes.
If we saw him in the act of murdering, and how he gets a kick out of that bloodlust. Have like a Hannibal Lecter moment where he has his victim like strung up, and it's super graphic, and that way when he connects with Carnage, you're like, oh shit, Carnage is the exact same way, and it's gonna be that, but like 100 times worse.
Yeah.
And then actually show it where Carnage is like just chopping up people to bits and stabbing them and eating them, and it's really gory and messy and kind of over the top. And you can do gore. I mean, was it The Walking Dead? I mean, I know TV has a separate rating system, but wasn't that essentially PG-13? Wasn't that like PG-13 equivalent?
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah,
I have no idea how they compare. But yeah, I don't know. If the direction they took Eddie Brock, I think him like saying fuck a lot would have just like been really ingrained in his character and would have made a lot of sense.
Yeah, and I will say the one time the one fuck they do get in this movie was very well used. I'll say that.
I don't even remember what I was just thinking that. I don't remember what the fuck was in this.
After Venom eats the Carnage symbiote, and he eats Cletus's head off, he says "fuck that guy."
Oh, right. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So the one they did get for PG-13 was well used, but I think they needed more. But yeah, so yeah, the PG-13 I think was a huge handicap and really an unforced one. Like, honestly, I mean, that, there have been very successful R-rated superhero and comic book movies, and this one could really have used the R rating.
Yeah, especially if you're gonna purposefully try to go the gritty, grounded route.
Yeah, honestly.
Like, if you're gonna make it dark, like, lean into it, make it dark.
Absolutely.
This could have also been like a thriller. That would have been really cool. We don't really have any superhero thrillers.
Yeah, that would have been awesome. And as you said, I mean, it would have been easy to do. yeah, it would have been easy to do, because all you have to do is just show us why Cletus, not even Carnage, why Cletus Cassidy himself is so dangerous. Everybody talks about how bad he is and how dangerous he is, but you never see him actually kill anybody. You never see him get rid of any bodies. He's just
you don't even see like the bodies themselves. Like all you see is this like drawing of a hillside that transitions into a shot of the hillside where they're like digging up graves, and you don't see any of the bodies. You don't know how many people he killed, how many people might still be out there, how he killed them, why he killed them.
I mean, this again, it's telling, not showing. This guy is so dangerous and is such a lethal, brutal serial killer that the governor of California, this was a little voice line they dropped in just an ADR, he's so bad that the governor of California has unilaterally repealed the death penalty, just execute this one man after they find all the bodies. He's that bad. But again, you never see anything in regards to it. It's just people talking about it. And so, that was huge missed opportunity. And it seems like such a layup, it seems like that's obvious, but they didn't do anything with it. Another thing, just random thought, speaking about how Eddie Brock is a terrible investigative journalist. I mean, the deal that he makes, I'm going to publish the serial killer's manifesto verbatim in exchange for the rights to his life story after I just broadcast his message to the world, is, I think, the most unethical journalism thing any journalist could ever possibly do.
Yeah, there's no like journalistic integrity there.
No, none whatsoever.
It's just like, because I remember there was a lot of I was listening to this, like, I think it was a podcast about the Zodiac killer himself, and newspapers were struggling with, like, do we release these puzzles that he's putting out? Because, on the one hand, like, it could be really useful to have, everyone trying to, break these codes and help solve this thing.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, it's like, we'd be causing mass panic, especially for San Francisco, by basically saying there's like this mass serial killer who, is out there and is dangerous. And I think they're also worried about it inspiring other people. I know there's been, journalistic issues with like the whole, when it came out that people were creating 3D printed guns and that there's like a website where you could just download them.
Yeah.
A lot of journalists were like, this is a great story. Do we publish it? Because we know it'll drive a lot of people to that website to then download and 3D print their own guns, which is, dangerous and bad. And there's none of that. There's none of that in this movie. He doesn't even get the life story, too.
No.
And it's honestly, also bad negotiation, because there's no, like, he just kind of blindly trusts that he'll get the story after publishing the serial killer's manifesto.
Yeah.
Cletus could have just been like, nah, fuck you. My message is already out there. Suck my ass. I already killed those people. Like,
yeah, like, I mean, there's no contract that is going to bind Cletus to actually fulfilling his end of the deal. Like, I mean, if Eddie Brock had half a brain cell, he would have gotten the life story first and then maybe decided whether to take Cletus up on his offer. I mean, it's not like Cletus has any leverage. I mean, he's locked up, about to be executed. So, I mean, Eddie could just say no, fuck you, and leave. But yeah, so that was just eye-poppingly unethical and stupid. And also, they made a great movie about what you were talking about as well. Zodiac, David Fincher movie, really good.
Yeah, same guy who did Seven.
Yeah. So absolutely. So. So, I mean, are there any other things that I thought were really well done? I mean, the runtime in Cletus, and that's it.
Yeah, I mean, not well done. I think another thing they could have added, I mean, there's this whole line where, like, Cletus was like, do you know why I picked you to, like, tell my story? It's because I wanted to be your friend.
Yeah, that was...
Why? Why the fuck? Like, create some kind of backstory where it's like, maybe Eddie Brock, when he was like used to be this great, fantastic journalist, like well respected, got the chance to interview Cletus Clyde. Is it Clyde or Clive?
Cletus Cassidy.
Oh, Cassidy. Where did I get Clyde from? Cletus Cassidy. When he gets the chance to interview Cletus Cassidy when he's like first brought in. And maybe that's where like a lot of this life story is told, yada yada yada. They kind of like build a rapport, and then Eddie Brock publishes this story, but leaves out the part where like his parents were abusive to Cletus, and the institutions he grew up in were abusive towards him, and that's why Cletus like is kind of hell-bent on destroying Eddie Brock because he messed up the story. And like you could kind of add this whole theme of like institutional failures, and kind of should you have a level of sympathy for the criminals and not just the victims. I don't know, do stuff like that. It could have been more interesting.
But as is, I mean, it was completely
the same plot points, but other than that, it was like, you published my story wrong. I wanted to be your friend for some reason. I'm gonna kill you now.
Yeah, I mean, for some reason he had that little monologue at the end, kind of saying that he demanded that he deserved sympathy, but it was as is, as the story exists. I mean, it was completely unearned. I mean, he's a psychopathic serial killer.
Yeah, it could have been unearned the other way, but like it would have made more sense.
Yeah,
it seemed like to Cletus, it seemed like they had history.
Yeah,
and to the audience member, it seemed like they just met.
Yeah, like what they could have done was, if they wanted to give Cletus some shred of sympathy, they could have, when they were doing, how they were doing those, the sketchings of his backstory.
Yeah, the little animation.
You could have explained how, in Cletus's mind, what he was doing was in self-defense. Like, he thought that he was going to die if he didn't, if he didn't hurt these people first. But I mean, no, that's not. It's just presented. He was this kid who just snapped and just killed his whole family.
Little snot-nosed shit.
Yeah, I mean, it's so, again, I mean, like that, and that would have been easy. Just give it, if you want to give him that shred of sympathy, give him this backstory where, in his mind it was self-defense or something like that.
Yeah, but, like go one way or the other. Like, either lean into him where he kind of has this deeper motivation and it just makes the character a little bit more interesting and a little bit more layered, or go all in and he's just like a complete batshit loony that likes to kill things because it's fun.
And that's fine too.
And then
like,
show him like not interacting with Eddie at all, and instead he's like torturing a fucking rat in his cell or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. One thing I do want to bring up too. How did you feel about Screech?
Yes, actually, I'm glad you mentioned that, because that was actually the next thing I was going to bring up as well. So, Screech. She was there. I'll say this. Naomi Harris, she's having a hell of an October, because she was Screech in this, and she was also just Moneypenny in No Time to Die. So she was in 2 massive blockbusters in back-to-back weeks. So good for her.
Yeah.
She's great. But yeah,
good
I mean,
payday.
Very good payday. But yeah, I mean, Frances Barrison Screech was, she can do this sonic wave thing, and that's cool, or it would be cool, but they don't do anything with the fact that her whole thing is having a power that allows her to create an immense noise, and she's constantly around this symbiote that is whose number one weakness is noise. Yeah. And yes, I know it creates a rift between Cletus and Carnage, but I mean, it doesn't really. Yeah, it doesn't. They don't really do anything beyond that. I mean, she uses her power. Carnage says, "Stop it," and then she stops it, and then that's it, and that's it.
And it's well, first of all, why does she have this power? We don't fucking know.
And they call it a mutation, so that was that was something.
but it's just not at all explained at all.
Mm.
Not even given a second thought. But ignoring that,
Mm.
I think she was severely underutilized.
Yeah.
I thought would have been so interesting if, she's, she's used to like defeat Venom and like getting Eddie and Venom's way, and they're struggling. And then maybe there's this like rift between her and Cletus, and I can play in the themes of this odd couple and like what does a good relationship look like versus a bad relationship, and it turns out they have a really bad and toxic relationship because they're both crazy people that like murder. And then maybe like Eddie is trying to convince her to like help them capture Cletus or something. I don't know. I thought that was like, the fact that she had a power that gets in the way of Cletus's power. I thought that was really cool. It was really interesting. Did not do enough with it at all.
No, not at all. Not at all. And I mean, but I will say this, here's the one thing that Screech does have going for her is she was the only one with an actually coherent mission as part of the little murder spree night that led up to the climax. She wants to kill Detective Mulligan because Mulligan straight up shot her in the head. So that's when she was a kid. So that was, that's a good motivation for wanting him dead. But Cletus wants what Eddie dead, and Carnage wants Venom dead. Cletus wants Eddie dead because he
I want to kill the father.
Cletus wants to kill Eddie because Eddie published the story that Cletus explicitly asked him to publish.
Yeah.
And Carnage wants to kill Venom because
Carnage is secretly a Meeseeks and doesn't like to be alive.
I guess so. He resents Venom for his own existence? I don't know. But, Francis was the only one who had an understandable reason to want to go on this little, murder spree. So
yeah, and like the murder spree makes sense, but the whole like wedding was so like contrived and overly complicated.
It really was. I mean, it was just like, have you seen a climax to a big action spectacle movie in the last 15 years? Then you've seen the end of this movie.
Yeah.
I mean, it was
honestly that's kind of the way I felt about every single piece of this movie. It's like every single character was playing a parody of themselves. Is what it felt like. They were all very cartoonish, which was really weird.
It really did feel like this movie could have come out in like 2005, and it would have made just as much sense as 2021, honestly, if not more so. That would have been like post like the 80s 90s Batman era, but still pre the Dark Knight. Kind of like Ben Affleck's Daredevil, like around that time, like just after the Matrix and the early Mission Impossible movies. Like if this movie came out in like 2004, 2005, it would have made just as much sense as today, if not more so contextually. It just felt so, I guess tropey would be the word to use, considering just the heights of narrative complexity that we've gotten used to now in these kinds of stories.
Yeah, maybe that's also part of like, us kind of growing up and maturing into adults and like, having a greater education and deeper understanding of society and its inner workings. It's like when you watch movies that deal with those topics, that kind of becomes normal instead of advanced or sophisticated. Yeah. And then movies that don't just seem like they're dumbed down. I don't know. It could also be that this movie was just poorly written, which is my personal take. But
yeah, and I mean, I think that might be a part of it, is just greater levels of maturity. But again, honestly, like if this movie had come out in like 2000, in like the mid 2000s, I mean, it wouldn't hold a candle to the first Iron Man or Batman Begins or any of these other, or Spider-Man 2, or frankly, if you ask me, Spider-Man 3. I know people are kind of mixed on Spider-Man 3. I really like Spider-Man 3. So yeah,
I haven't seen it recently enough to comment on it.
Mhm.
I probably should go back and rewatch it.
But yeah,
Before,
mm.
but
Yeah, yeah.
um,
But those are the kind of
yeah,
movies that we're talking about when we say mid 2000s. You know, the Raimi Spider-Man trilogy.
like the campy superhero movies.
Exactly. And you know, yeah. So you know, even by those standards, it would have been kind of run of the mill. You know, like, you know, if this came out in 2005, like the original Tim Burton Batmans would be over a decade old. So, you know, it's like, you know, go back and watch those and you'd
Yeah.
have a better time. Um, so yeah, and yeah, so let's talk about the post-credit scene. Because frankly, I'm looking at the list. The rest of the supporting cast, like you know, Detective Mulligan is just grizzled cop dude. You know, Stephen
Very
Graham.
like side character to a side character. Like
Exactly, yeah. Like Stephen Graham is another actor I really like. You know, just plays grizzled
he,
cop dude. Hmm.
yeah, and then like Dan,
Yeah,
he's just kind of
Dan.
there.
Yeah, G's just there. It felt like Anne, Michelle Williams, she had even less to do in this movie than the first one. Like, you know, in the first one, at least the Venom binds to her for a little bit. It's this cool
Yeah.
moment where Venom goes from her back to Eddie, but she doesn't even get that in this, really. You know, it's just, you know, it's just.
I did like some of the banter between Venom and Eddie where they're both kind of in love with this girl.
Yeah.
I thought that was fun. And like when she was confronting Venom, who was inhabiting Mrs. Chen,
Mm.
like that was cool. Seeing her kind of
Yeah.
have this command over Venom and
Yeah.
kind of like being really smart about how to convince him to do stuff. But
Mm.
it's like, oh, cool. She's kind of like strong and does not flinch in the face of danger.
Yeah.
Uh,
Because she
because
knows
it's
Venom.
just yeah, it's just your usual alien bullshit.
Yeah.
And then she gets captured, and it's just like immediately becomes the damsel in distress, and is
Yeah.
not even rescued by Dan. Like that could have been a thing where like Dan rescues her and kind of proves that he's the better, fiance, and Eddie's like, yeah, you're right. Like I'm
Yeah.
kind of a mess. That would have been cool. Character growth, where he
Yeah.
like admits that, but no. Yeah, she gets thrown in a box and
Yeah. Quite
like
literally.
literally thrown in a box
Yeah.
for the rest of the movie.
Yeah. No. Exactly. I mean, I think that the term fridging was genuinely invented to represent this exact scenario. I mean, I know that fridging refers to dead female characters, but I mean, when a character is literally thrown in a box and kept there to motivate the hero.
To be fair, it was a coffin.
It was a
Or I
coffin.
guess
That's
more
true.
of like a sarcophagus.
Oh,
So
do you think maybe
fridging,
this was like a?
I think fridging, I think that works here.
Yeah. Do you think that
I'd let that slide.
maybe it's actually a really intelligent meta commentary on fridging? That they would be so on
Wow.
the nose about it. They would actually be so obvious so as to critique it.
Damn, Andy Serkis, I'm sorry. I take back everything mean I said.
Yeah, and actually, yeah, because speaking of, this movie only had one writer, Kelly Marcel, who was one of the co-writers in the first one. So, yeah, I mean, I honestly, looking back on it, I don't know what I
I
expected.
think we found out who the better writer of the two was.
Well, that's the thing is that I mean, like, you know, it's I don't know what I expected. You know, like yes, like Andy Serkis. I mean, he's like a cool stunt, director.
Yeah, I
Because
don't think he had much pull in the story. I know Tom Hardy had some say in it.
he had some input, but when you bring the same writer over from the first one, I don't know why, and I always do this. I give people the benefit of the doubt, and I really shouldn't. I don't know why I assumed that you would bring back the same writer and you would have a radically different outcome.
Honestly, it's a better way to live.
I suppose.
I can get very cynical and pessimistic about these things. And I'm never disappointed. I'm never surprised, but it still sucks.
Well, honestly,
I admire your optimism.
I mean, honestly, I'm shocked to hear you say that, and this is a genuine moment, that I want to have because, truly one of the qualities that I've always appreciated most about your personality, and this is for the whole time I've known you, is how uncynical you are. That is No, seriously.
Really?
This is a quality I really have always loved about your personality. Is you've always, at least in times I've interacted with you, I've never known you to be a cynical person or a person who's given to, a huge amount of pessimism or just. I mean, you just always seem to have a very forward-looking, positive outlook about you, genuinely. So I'm surprised to hear you say that about yourself, because I've never thought of you as being a cynical person, and that's a feature I appreciate, because it's so easy to be cynical nowadays. And I'm not saying that there's not good reason for cynicism, but I mean, it just feels like it's such a low-hanging fruit of intellectualism, I guess, is to be cynical. I mean, it's easy to complain, but it's harder to actually, seek out and find the good in the world. So that's a feature I've always appreciated about you. So that's a genuine comment I wanted to make there. But
thank you. I'm genuinely tearing up right now.
No, it's true. It really is true. I've been meaning to tell you that for a while. No, of course. I've been meaning to tell you that for a while, honestly. But yeah, it's so yeah. That's pretty much it.
I want us to in this moment. I want to. This was really nice. You're my best friend, and I don't know. I love you, man. Like, we've been friends forever, and I think this is why, because we just kind of get each other and kind of push each other's in ways and bring out the best qualities in each other. I really appreciate you.
Oh, thank you, and please know.
And I appreciate you, the listener, for liking and subscribing.
Oh, yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Yeah, no, but thank you very much. And then that's, truly that's the reason we've been doing this, and why it's been such a blast to do this for the past. We're in month 5 now, aren't we? Yeah, we're in month 5. And I mean, it's, that's why we love doing this, and that's why this has become such a fantastic kind of passion project for us, is because it just allows us to do more of what we were already doing, what we already love to do, just in a more professional way, in a way that can actually endure. Yeah, so
because you left. Well, you left after 8th grade, but you were still like in New
Jersey,
for a year.
Yeah.
And then you moved.
Yeah.
So we were doing long distance, and I think it would be like every 3 or 4 months we'd FaceTime once and just talk for like 6 or 7 hours.
Oh yeah, and honestly, it was even more frequent than that, because I mean, I remember.
I thought at one point there had been like a 6-month period where we had not talked.
Well, there
was like, shit, I really need to like call.
Yeah, well, there were gaps, certainly, but I remember like during the school year, like we tried to make it a regular feature, like every Friday we would try to reach out, and like every Friday, every other Friday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's like it wasn't as regular as it is now.
Oh yeah.
I think that's one of the things I love about this podcast, is because we have an excuse to like catch up and talk to each other every single week, or more frequently than that, when we do our reaction episodes, and we'll get on and game together. And I mean, it's been really nice. I feel like we've gotten a lot closer. And
absolutely. And yeah, I mean, really, I mean, the greatest utility personally of this podcast is both. I mean, it's a fantastic outlet to be creative, and it's something that we love doing, but also, I mean, it just serves as a kind of permanent record of these great conversations that, again, we would be having anyway.
Yeah.
But now there gets to be this record that's out there, and something that we can point to and be proud of, and say that this is something that we did because we love doing it, and
this is a legacy that we're leaving behind. This is the digital footprint that we are leaving as 2 people in this just big world.
Yeah, just 2 friends hanging out and talking about stuff we love. So absolutely.
And stuff we don't, like Space Jam.
Yeah, and stuff we don't. But it's there's a reason behind all of it, because this is a passion project, and I'm sure the people at home know this. We don't make a penny off of these videos, and so we just have to find the time.
Yeah.
Not yet. Maybe one day, but we don't make a dime off of them, and we have to carve time out of our own schedules to obviously to go see the things that we're talking about and record these episodes and edit them and upload them. And so obviously the stuff that we do end up talking about for those reasons, we don't have the luxury of being professional reviewers where we can just, that's our job and we can do that all day. So when we are talking about something, that tends to be the stuff that we're really invested in for one reason or another. And so, yeah, the stuff we talk about, there's not a ton of stuff like this where it's kind of in the middle, some good, some bad. It's usually stuff that we are already super invested in and we already love, like obviously the MCU stuff and Star Wars, or stuff that, we know is going to be dreadful, but, because we have a personal attachment to it, we want to talk about it, like Space Jam, and so on and so forth. So, that's really that's really the reason why there's so little middle ground. But I think the greatest test will be, we have to find a topic one of these days where there's something that either you really love and I hate, or I really love and you hate, because we need to get like a Siskel and Ebert thing going on where we disagree and we can debate each other.
That would be fun. I mean, I think like during these, there's always something where we'll kind of disagree on. But yeah, I think that would be really cool to go all in. Yeah, I mean, we have a lot planned for this channel. I know we eventually want to do like a season 2.
Oh yeah, we're gonna do.
I think it'd be really nice.
Yeah, and well, let's not talk about it too much because we want to save all of
these are all speculative.
Yeah, we
hypothetically.
We do have some big plans for 2022, which will be revealed at the end of the year. We've got a lot of very special stuff planned for the end of this year. But yeah, I mean, just in terms of the next 2 months, I mean, you look at what's coming down the pipeline on our schedule. I mean, we've got, almost every episode, every week is a special episode. Like we have so many more guest episodes and so many big releases. The Eternals is coming out soon. Obviously, Spider-Man's coming out. Holiday specials. Halloween's in a couple weeks. After that, we've got a Thanksgiving special. We're going to have a Christmas special. We have, it's going to be almost nonstop special episodes until the end, through the end of this year. So, and then that's not even counting, the stuff that we're going to announce for 2022 by the end of the year. But there's some really exciting stuff coming down the pipeline, really exciting stuff. We can't wait to share that with you. So. Thank you. We're not ending the episode yet. We still have the elephant in the room to talk about. But thank you all out there genuinely for sticking with us. And we just last week put out our solo Star Wars story review, and that's been our biggest video for a while, for a couple months. So thank you for watching that.
Matthew, I know you're listening right now. Come back.
Yes, please.
You're showing up in the next episode, but come back for another recording. That was fun.
Yeah. You were great for our views. So please. But yes, thank you all out there for your continuing interest in our little project here. And we can't wait to do more of it and bring back more of our friends and talk about all the exciting stuff coming out at the end of this year, because there is a lot. There's a lot coming out. But with that, I think we've covered all of the Venom Let There Be Carnage parts of this Venom Let There Be Carnage review. So let's talk about the massive 20-ton elephant in the room, and that is the mid-credit scene. So Venom and Eddie, they got out of town. They've left San Francisco. They're on this tropical sandy beach somewhere hanging out.
Probably Mexico if they fled the country, but
probably.
They're fugitives on their own, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they're fugitives because, of course, they got tied up in the whole events with Carnage. They're on a beach somewhere, someplace pleasant, and they're hanging out in this hotel room. And Venom picks this moment of all moments to mention, hey, there's this massive intergalactic symbiote hive mind that's out there, and look, I can't show you or give you access to this whole hive mind because it would break your brain instantly. Since we're buddies now, hanging out on the run, Thelma and Louise style, why don't I give you a little tiny taste of the vast galaxy of knowledge that the symbiotes have access to. And it seems like he's about to do this, But at that very moment, there is a bright golden flash that happens just outside the window of the hotel room. And the hotel room itself changes from what they were in to it's a very similar hotel room, but it's a little nicer, a little newer. The ceiling fan is different. Stuff has changed a bit. The TV is different. And sure enough, you hear J. Jonah Jameson's iconic barking coming through the television. And this isn't just any J. Jonah Jameson. This is the J. Jonah Jameson news report from the end of Spider-Man Far From Home, now being broadcast live. So this is happening at the exact same moment that Far From Home ended on, explaining, all of the Spider-Man news coming out, from, the London events of that movie. And yeah, we see a image of the true blue Tom Holland Spider-Man. And Venom gets up, he says, "That guy," and then he licks the screen. Oh, also, first he says that this isn't the hive mind thing that he was promising.
Yeah,
this is something else.
Completely unrelated.
Yeah.
That just happened to be horribly timed.
Yeah, and it's he licks the screen, he licks Spider-Man's image, even though of course this Venom has never met Spider-Man, or at least so we would believe. And yeah, it seems that Venom has been transported to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. That seems to be the pretty clear implication of what's happened. And it makes you wonder. So I mean, obviously there's a lot to talk about, but the first thing is the fact that this symbiote hive mind is just coming up now. Do you think that Venom was suggesting that one of these shared memories could have been Topher Grace's Venom from Spider-Man 3? Because that would be the only way that this Venom would have any relationship with Spider-Man, even if it's a different Spider-Man.
Yeah, I was thinking about that when I was watching it. The way I interpreted it was, there's going to be this intergalactic, possibly inter-universal, or inter-multiversal symbiote hive mind, and it wasn't going to be Eddie Brock and Venom from the Sonyverse in the next Spider-Man movie, but instead the story of a different symbiote. So that way they can still use the Venom character, but they're not like mixing the two universes specifically. But then he's like, no, this is not my doing specifically. Like this wasn't me. This wasn't the thing. So the only other reason I could possibly guess, I did not think of that he was remembering the previous. What I instead think happened was that, they're trying to do this whole lethal protector thing, vigilante thing. And then all of a sudden on the news, they see this guy, Spider-Man, responsible for killing Mysterio and a ton of other people using these drones, and he's a bad guy. So Venom's like, oh, that guy, I'm going to eat his head because he'll be my next, my next, target as the lethal protector.
Yeah.
And I think that just made it kind of purposefully misleading. But I don't know. That is an interesting theory because obviously, Doc Ock and Green Goblin are coming back. From the Raimi films.
And it looks like, we didn't get a super clear view of them in the No Way Home trailer, but it looks like Sandman's also coming back, the Lizard's coming back. We know Electro's coming back because Jamie Foxx has been confirmed. So it seems like we're already most of the way. We've got 5 members of the Sinister Six accounted for, but there is that 6th slot open. And now Venom is in the MCU. I mean, it definitely seems like, if I had to guess, Venom is not going to be a pure antagonist to Spider-Man, but I mean, he would complete the Sinister Six if he was to be in there. So he just has to get himself over to New York, obviously. But it's a distinct possibility, I think. But so first of all, I mean, it's always a delight to get J.K. Simmons back as J. Jonah Jameson, because he's just fantastic.
It's J.K. Simmons. Yeah.
I mean, you can't go wrong. So, I don't want to pat myself on the back too much, but I seem to recall I said that something very similar to this would happen in our Venom trailer reaction. I'm just saying.
Yeah, I can't. Did we place bets? On?
Oh boy, yeah.
On Carnage, or was it bets on Spider-Man?
Yeah, I don't recall if we placed bets specifically. We'll have to go back and rewatch that reaction. But we were making predictions on what was going to happen at the very end of this movie / the mid-credit scene, post-credit scene. And I do remember making a prediction that this movie was going to tie in. There was going to be some big reveal that was going to tie in somehow to the Marvel universe. I think I don't think I predicted Spider-Man specifically, but I did say there's going to be some connection, probably J. Jonah Jameson related, because his son, was an astronaut. He died in the rocket explosion at the beginning of the first movie. So yeah. I think that was my prediction, was that it was going to be something J. Jonah Jameson related, which I was right about. J. Jonah Jameson was there, but they went even a step further than what I would have guessed, which was actually show Tom Holland on screen. So
yeah, I remember that. You said J. Jonah Jameson was going to be the connecting link.
Yeah. So I think I still have my crown for being the Loki theory master, and it seems like maybe I may have done that for Venom too. I'm just saying.
One of these days, I'm going to knock that crown off your smug little head.
Well, yeah. Well, good luck. You have quite a bit of ground to catch up. I'm not saying I'm a smug winner. I'm just saying I think I'm objectively the best in every possible way at making these theories. So.
I have to say, you're the most humble person I have ever met.
Right. Yeah, I think so too. Sure enough, we did get that MCU connection, and frankly, I mean, again, so this is what we've been alluding to the whole episode. Sony is now realizing, we're really not doing a good job explaining why this Sonyverse should be relevant. So if we can't make this a thing, why don't we just shove it into the biggest cultural behemoth of the 21st century and just see what happens? If we could just take this and attach it to the MCU, it instantly becomes hundreds of magnitudes more relevant. So and that requires no effort and no work. So let's just do that. And they did.
It's like the kid who did nothing in a group project.
Yeah.
Except he did the presentation, so then he also gets an A.
Exactly. Yeah. But he's the kid that does the title slide where you write everybody's name down, so he put his name first.
Yeah, no, he didn't contribute any work, but he read 2 out of the 8 slides.
Yeah.
So then he also gets an A because the whole group gets an A. Yeah.
Exactly. So yeah, I mean, is it definitely a craven move to make on Sony's part? And I'm not just saying that as in reference to we're probably going to get a Kraven the Hunter at some point. Yes, it is definitely a very craven move. Sony has not done anything on their own to justify why this Venom is very interesting or should continue, but he's in the MCU now, so here, Marvel, it's your problem now. You do something with him.
Yeah.
Just take him and do it better, and then just send us the check when you're finished, and then that's it. And so I understand why they did it, and frankly, so long as we're seeing more of this Venom, I'd rather see him in the MCU than this, than more of this. But it's I think you put it perfectly. Sony is like the kid that has not done any of the work, but is now getting, at least part of the credit because they just shoved him into the MCU now.
Yeah.
So,
I do you think that was the right move? Sony's goal is to bring relevancy to their Venomverse. Was this the right way to do it?
I mean, honestly, I'm having a hard time imagining any other way they could have done it, because the Venomverse occupied such a weird space in relation to the MCU. Like, it wasn't the MCU, but it was very much MCU adjacent, and it was very kind of amorphous what that relationship was. So, whenever they were just going to go ahead and say, yep, this is it, Venom is in the MCU now, I think it was just going to be some, it's just going to be like, this sudden thing. And, I didn't think that there was going to be a very gradual shift. And yeah, I think so. Yeah, I'm having a hard time imagining a different way they could have done it. And frankly, I mean, it makes a lot of sense, because clearly the way they staged this whole event was they're tying it into what's already going on in the MCU with the multiverse crisis. We've had WandaVision and Loki, and even What If, and certainly No Way Home is going to be hugely involved with this.
Yeah.
This is the multiverse crisis that's been building and building and building leading up to Doctor Strange 2. So, seeing this Venom from the Venomverse, who was not in the MCU but MCU adjacent, getting pulled into the MCU by a very Doctor Strange-esque golden burst of light, where everything changes, but changes in a subtle way, and now he's in the MCU. It makes a lot of sense. That's definitely thematically consistent with what's happening in the MCU currently. So, I mean, yeah. So I think that to that extent, yeah, it did work well, because you can easily explain away how it happened. Because if this was pre-Phase 4, it wouldn't have made any fucking sense. This would have just been such an out of nowhere reveal. But because we've been so methodically primed from, for this, or from, again, all those series I just mentioned, and obviously No Way Home is coming up. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And, maybe this now opens the door to, like I said, I mean, I no longer think it's impossible Venom will pop up in No Way Home. I doubt he'll show up in Doctor Strange 2, but we'll certainly see him again. So, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how I feel about this kind of juncture. I feel like it would have made more sense to find a way to have Tom Holland's Spider-Man leave the MCU. Just because Sony will eventually want, like, this deal with Disney is kind of seems like it's pretty temporary.
Yeah.
And at some point they will want their character back. And they would want their character to then exist in this Sonyverse, Venomverse.
Yeah.
So I always expected that it would kind of be the other way around, where instead of Venom joins the MCU, Spider-Man leaves the MCU.
Yeah.
It just feels messy either way. It's weird.
Yeah, it's definitely very jarring. It's jarring, but at the same time, kind of predictable, because, again, Sony, they
didn't do any of the work.
Yeah, I mean, they've had 2 movies to explain why we should care about the Venomverse, and they really haven't succeeded. So, in the absence of that, you could just keep making these movies, which will have diminishing returns each time, or, again, just push him into the cultural juggernaut that is the MCU, and, that's just this this kind of self-sustaining machine that, will instantly increase the credibility and relevance of the character. So, well, actually, no, I shouldn't say it's self-sustaining, because, unlike Sony with their Sonyverse, Marvel actually does do the work.
Yeah.
And that's why they haven't had a bomb in their whole 25, 26 movies of trying. So,
I don't even think Thor: The Dark World was technically a bomb.
No, it wasn't.
It was the worst, but I don't think it bombed.
There is not a single MCU movie that has been gotten a rotten rating on Rotten Tomatoes. They've all been 60% and up.
Damn.
Yeah.
That's impressive. Actually.
Yeah, like 26, I don't even know how many they're up to now, 26, 27 movies, and not a single rotten movie.
Yeah.
And meanwhile,
they definitely know what they're doing.
Yeah, meanwhile, Venom has had 2 tries, and it's been rotten on both of them.
Yeah.
I mean, this one came close. I think it was like 58, 59, but still,
Yeah. I don't know. I see why they're doing it. But I feel like it's not gonna do much. Because I think you have, your MCU casual fans. They're not gonna go watch the Sony Venomverse movies after they see Venom.
No.
You have the MCU nutheads. Maybe they go back and watch the previous Venomverse things.
Yeah.
Maybe they watch some of them, some of the new stuff that comes out, but probably only if Spider-Man crosses over, like, permanently.
Yeah.
And then you have, like, the Sony Venom fans who will, continue watching the franchise, but there won't be, like, an increase or decrease. And then you might get some overlap. But chances are, like, if you are a fan of the Venom franchise, you're already a fan of the MCU franchise.
Oh, absolutely.
You're already watching those movies.
Yeah. There's very few people that are just Venom fans who are not also MCU fans.
So I feel like there's not going to be... I doubt that they'll be able to get more of the casual fans to cross over. Because what the casual fans are more likely to do is just watch more of the Marvel movies.
Yeah.
They probably don't watch all of them, but they're probably just going to start watching more of them. That's more likely than to suddenly start watching these Sony Venom movies. Because if you're a casual fan, you probably don't really understand what the relation is or what the connection is.
Yeah.
And that's always been my biggest concern, is that, it's going to be really confusing. Like, my parents are kind of always impressed at how many details I remember about these movies. And about, like, the sequels of these movies and, like, what came before what came after what. I feel like I'm going to have to remind them what the previous Spider-Man movies were before No Way Home. And I feel like, if they had watched the Venom movies going into that Spider-Man movie, they probably wouldn't have remembered the plots of those Venom movies.
No, probably not.
Like, if they were even casual fans of that. So
yeah,
from, like, a marketing standpoint, I just don't know. Like, if you want Venom in the MCU, make it a new character.
Who could actually have that pre-existing relationship with Peter Parker.
And just lease out the character rights. I don't know. It's weird. I mean, I know No Way Home is going to be really good because, like you said, there hasn't been a single rotten movie.
Yeah.
Marvel obviously knows what they're doing, but...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess I just worry that it's going to jump the shark a little bit.
Yeah. And that's the thing, is that from Marvel's perspective, I mean, they could really care less whether they have Venom or not. Like, they don't need Venom. But for Sony, the appeal is obvious. And this reveal definitely felt like them realizing what they should have done from the beginning and just, kind of retconning it into existence in a certain sense. Literally transporting this version of Venom, who has been very middling in his own movies, and just putting him where he should have been all along in the MCU.
Do you think that's what's going to... how sometimes you have a show that, like, will, like, reboot or does, like, a soft reboot, and you have, like, the same actors, but they're kind of, like, starting from the beginning, and they don't really acknowledge the previous one. Like, I wonder if they should even go that route, where they just kind of ditch the Venomverse, and basically say, like, you can watch these movies, this explains the character, but going forward, there is no separate MCU and separate Venomverse.
Yeah.
Together, it is the MCU Sonyverse.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly what's going to happen. Is they're going to explain it away by saying that the Venom movies are now relegated to this alternate universe that is now over here, and we're not really interacting with it anymore.
Yeah.
Venom is now over here, so just essentially, like, well, and that's the thing, is that it's still Tom Hardy, so people are going to have a hard time distinguishing, but they're going to say, this is still the Tom Hardy Venom character from the previous movies, but don't worry about the events of the previous movies because this is now over here in the MCU.
No, I'm not even saying that they're going to ignore the previous movies. What I think it's going to be is that, like, going forward, kind of everyone in those, like, Venom and Tom Hardy, Eddie Brock will, although not technically in the MCU, will acknowledge the events of the MCU as if they are, like, continuing to be part of that universe. And it's like MCU adjacent. They're on, like, the fringes of the MCU doing their own stories and, like, but they technically exist in the same world. And that way you can have crossover with Spider-Man that, you know, ties into other MCU and Avengers stuff, but doesn't necessarily conflict with it.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you're going to see,
the smartest way to go about things.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you're going to see is they're probably going to do with Venom what I think they're going to do with Deadpool is, you know, this is the same Deadpool that you loved from Deadpool and Deadpool 2, but now that he's in the MCU, he has to get up to speed with everything that's been happening, and he's got to kind of catch up to where, you know, to where we are, obviously. So,
and then going forward, the MCU is now their home universe.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
So
I think that makes a lot of sense. I think that would work probably the best.
And I think so.
Good for Marvel and the MCU as a whole, because then it just gets that much bigger.
Oh yeah, no, certainly.
And, you know, like, monetarily wise, it doesn't matter if, you know, the fringes of the MCU end up producing flops because those are made by other companies and the money goes or doesn't go to them. And Marvel still has their, like, and it's kind of like almost like spin-offs, like a spin-off show where like takes place in the same universe but just focuses on different characters, and that'll just be kind of the Venom and Sony characters will be an MCU spin-off.
Yeah, I think so. And I mean, frankly, you know, that's a big part of the reason as well why I don't think that Disney and Sony are going to break up very soon. I mean, obviously, they're both very big companies that like making money very much. And so there will come a point where one of them will try to get greedy again. But honestly, from Disney's perspective, I mean, it seems to me, you know, if I were a Disney executive, I mean, whatever Sony's asking for, if they want 70%, 80% of first gross, you know, just give it to them. Because honestly, Spider-Man is the biggest superhero in the MCU. You know, he's got the biggest name recognition, the biggest fan base following by far.
I mean, didn't Far From Home do better than? No, it didn't do better than Endgame.
No, Endgame is the biggest movie in the world. Yeah,
I think trailer views.
Oh yeah, no, I mean,
it did better in trailer views.
Yes, I mean, in terms of just an individual hero, Spider-Man is bigger than Iron Man, bigger than Captain America, you name it. I mean, Spider-Man adds a huge amount to the MCU, and so a huge amount of the, you know, the cultural, just, you know, the cultural omnipresence of the MCU, I guess, because Spider-Man is just that big of a character. And so if Sony wants 80%, give it to them. It's not like Marvel Studios isn't making money. I mean, they're putting out 4 movies a year now. So let Sony have their 80% and keep Spider-Man in the MCU.
And also, like, Marvel still owns the toy rights.
Yeah.
The toy sales rights. And that's where actually most of the money gets made.
Yeah.
So, you know, they'd still make a fuck ton of money.
Exactly.
Even if they were given the majority of the profits to Sony. But I think that I had a follow-up, but I can't remember what it was. Shit.
But yeah, that was the mid-credit scene. Quite the shocker, quite the predictable shocker, but still quite the shocker.
I remember now.
Yeah.
Assuming that they go forward with this MCU Sonyverse, where Sony is just kind of at the fringes of the MCU, but still part of the MCU.
Yeah.
What does that mean for Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield Spider-Man? Will they stay in the MCU? Will they return to their own timelines, and maybe Venom and Eddie Brock stay in the MCU because they're not fugitives in the MCU?
That is the million-dollar question. What is going to happen with Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield? And obviously that's the big question everybody wants to know going into No Way Home. And I think that if we're ever going to get a resolution to that question, it's going to be in that movie. Because, I mean, we already see, obviously, we've seen these villains from previous movies and previous iterations of Spider-Man coming back. So it's a natural, logical conclusion. Well, if the villains can come back, so can the Spider-Men themselves. So everybody wants to know what's going to happen with Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire. And honestly, I have no clue. You know, we were making predictions about this in our No Way Home trailer reaction. You know, are we going to see them in No Way Home or not? And
at this point, it's kind of all but confirmed. I mean,
you think so?
There were leaked set photos of Andrew Garfield on the set for.
Yeah, well, you know, I mean, but there's a lot of, you know, deep fakes and photoshops and things.
There was a video. I watched a video that specifically broke down why it could not have been a deepfake. It broke down like the technology of deepfakes and how they could have faked it, but how that would have been like really, really difficult. It was a great video by Corridor Digital. They do a lot of deepfakes themselves, so they've kind of become experts in that field. So after watching that, I'm pretty convinced that it's a real set photo.
Okay, well, I mean, I'll check it out, but I'm always just cautious around the Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield rumors because everybody wants it to be true, but you just know that if they are in No Way Home, again, that's going to be guarded like a state secret. Like that is going to be kept so under wraps that, you know, unless there's some catastrophic leak, no one's going to know until the release.
I mean, it could be a staged leak instead of a set advertisement. It's, you know, set up as a leak to kind of continuously generate buzz and kind of press over it. Because that has kind of become a legit marketing tactic in the last few years, where they'll like do fake leaks of stuff, and you know, you can't really tell these days.
But yeah, that's my approach to it. You know, obviously I want it to be true just as much as everybody else, but I really believe that we are not going to get any sanctioned, sanctioned kind of confirmation of either of them being in No Way Home until the movie comes out. You know, if they're in the movie, then they're in the movie, but you won't hear about it before then. That is a secret so precious, because imagine what that reveal is going to be like on opening day in the theater. Like that's going to shatter the crust of the earth. It's going to generate so much excitement. So yeah, I really believe that if they are in this movie, no one is going to, well, again, sure, leaks happen, but there's going to be no official even suggestion of that being a possibility until the movie comes out. That's my take on it. But I hope it does happen, and frankly, yeah, it seems like it really could happen. I mean, again, if you're bringing the old villains back, of course it makes sense. Why not bring back the old Spider-Man themselves? So, you know, we're going into the live-action Spider-Verse now.
But assuming that they do come back, I guess the not $1 million question, but like $500,000 question would be, will they stay?
I think that, honestly, I don't even know. I don't know how, because that's really going to the next step, to not just bring them in, but also keep them inside the MCU. Like, we're going to see them again in future MCU things. Like, that almost seems too good to be true. I don't know if we're going to get that. I think that if they do show up in No Way Home, that's probably going to be a quick one-time thing, and they're going to go back to their own universes. That sounds too good to be true, that they come into the MCU and stay. I don't think that you're going to see either of them come back to play Spider-Man long-term, especially considering, you know, you don't want to step on Tom Holland's shoes. I mean, he is the Spider-Man of the moment. So I think that there's every chance there will be a No Way Home, but beyond that, I have a really hard time visualizing them staying in the MCU beyond that movie.
Did Andrew Garfield want to do the original planned Amazing Spider-Man 3?
Oh yeah, I think. Well, actually, yeah.
I know Sony. I think Sony, they themselves decided to can it after the Amazing Spider-Man 2 did not do well.
Well, yeah. Well, that's the thing, is I think he did want to, but after they decided that they weren't going to go ahead with Amazing Spider-Man 3 and obviously reboot the character in the MCU, I think he said that he was kind of relieved to not be playing that huge character anymore, because that gave him then the space to go do other stuff. He's been in a bunch of Broadway plays and musicals, and he's had some indie movies that have done really well, and he's kind of coming back to big movies now. He's got this big Netflix movie that's coming out in a few weeks, Tick Tick Boom, which is kind of like a Broadway musical thing. So
he's also Yeah.
So I think if I recall correctly, I remember him saying that he was relieved that just so long as they weren't moving forward with an Amazing Spider-Man 3, that it gave him a chance to kind of step back and refocus and do other things. I mean, Sony. I mean, let's not forget. I mean, Sony was not originally in love with the idea of rebooting the character inside the MCU. I mean, yeah, the Amazing Spider-Man 2 didn't do that well, but the fact of the matter is, the instigating event that caused Sony to talk to Marvel in the first place about bringing Spider-Man over was the catastrophic email leaks that they had back in, I think it was 2014, 2015, which was just, which was earth-shattering for that company, certainly. That kind of forced them to rethink everything. So it was really after the leaks Sony started talking to Marvel, and that's how they because Civil War was already in development at that point. They were, about to start filming it. And so bringing Spider-Man in was kind of a last minute, let's start Spider-Man off here. And
they integrated that very well.
Oh yeah. The rest was history. So
So knowing all that, my official prediction is that Garfield and Maguire will both show up in No Way Home. But I think they will return to their universes after giving Tom Holland kind of their unofficial or official, the actors giving their official, those Spider-Man giving their unofficial blessing for him to be the next Spider-Man. And they'll return to their respective universes. And then I think Eddie Brock and Venom will stay within the MCU itself because they are fugitives on the run, but in the MCU they aren't, because no one knows who they are. And then he could go back to the Daily Bugle with J. Jonah Jameson, and then that way you have interactions with Peter Parker Spider-Man without Spider-Man having to leave the MCU. And that way, like, the Morbius shit makes sense, where we saw Michael Keaton's Vulture.
Yeah, somehow out of prison. He's hanging out in London now.
Like, that would then make sense if that all was taking place in the MCU, technically. Just kind of on the fringes, so...
Which, here's another quick question just about the mid-credit scene is, do you think that, because, I'm assuming that this is a Doctor Strange thing. I mean, like, the golden flash of light, it all seemed very Doctor Strange reality-bending-esque. Do you think that Doctor Strange brought Venom here to the MCU intentionally, or was this just a consequence of the unfolding crisis, and it was a random event?
I think it was a random event. Because, it was, the way that it's presented, at least, is that, Peter Parker kind of unintentionally fucks with the spell and messes it up.
Yeah.
And then it causes the universe to break.
Mm.
There's a lot of theories about whether Doctor Strange is like secretly, possessed or the bad guy or Mephisto. But yeah, I don't know. I assume it's kind of a contrived coincidence.
Yeah.
Like it's blatantly just Sony trying to put Venom in the MCU, but in MCU terms, it's completely random.
Yeah, and I mean, really, the only reason I asked, because I agree with you, I think it is more likely just a random happenstance. But the only reason I ask is because, as we just saw in What If, Doctor Strange does have a penchant for assembling oddballs from across the multiverse to for various specific reasons. So
yeah, technically the Watcher assembled that crew, but
well, yeah, they were kind of working together.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is interesting. So Venom is in the MCU now.
Supposedly.
And yeah, and
Honestly,
it's a fresh start. Yeah, I think that just so long as if we have to continue on with this version of Eddie Brock and Venom, it's a fresh start for them. And like I said, I'd rather see them in the MCU going forward than not. So
yeah.
Mission accomplished, Sony. You'll make even more money now. This is really them having their cake and eating it too. You get to make this Venom sequel that made a ton of money just because it's a blockbuster in a time when we're still more or less starved for blockbusters. And then they get to eat it too by just shoving him into. After that movie was kind of underwhelming, just shove him into the MCU at the end so people stay excited. Hey, I mean it worked. So, credit where credit is due there.
Yeah.
But yeah, looking forward in terms of theories, we've had such a hard time theorizing. I mean, obviously we have tons of outstanding theories on No Way Home, so that's kind of the big theory. But we've had a hard time theorizing about the Eternals because that movie is just going to be so different than everything we've seen before in the MCU.
Yeah.
I'm honestly, I've gone from just excited on the level of, oh, it's another MCU thing, so that's cool, to now I'm really excited to see this movie just to understand what the fuck is going on.
For me, it was the shot of the Celestial.
Yeah.
I think that's what made it like, oh damn, this is pretty fucking cool, actually.
Yeah. Honestly, like it's not a result of any trailer, any new footage. I just genuinely now have gotten a lot more excited just of my own accord, because the more I think about it, it's like this movie is it's just so different. It is taking such a different track than anything we've seen previously in the MCU, a whole new corner we haven't explored. Like, it's the potential of this movie, I think, is greater than anything we've seen. I mean, obviously not including the Avengers movies, anything we've seen since like Guardians of the Galaxy, in terms of just going to a new place and exploring new stuff. So like I have no idea what to expect, but I'm really excited to see just what the hell is going on with the Eternals. But that's what makes it so hard to theorize about. But then after that we have Hawkeye, which we've already placed some bets on that, what's going to happen there. So yeah, it's really just Hawkeye and Spider-Man, and well, we will see who's wearing the crown by the end of the year, but I like my chances.
Fuck you. We'll see. No, it's all good spirited. It's all good fun. I need to go back and actually listen to what I said and what you said. And to see how wrong you were, but
yes. Not likely, but sure.
What even were our stakes? I don't even remember what we decided.
Well, I can tell you for Spider-Man.
Oh wait, I think it was like you have to sing the Spider-Man theme song, but with lyrics about how you're bad at crafting theories.
Yeah, that's exactly it. You have to write and perform your original Spider-Man theme on air on the show.
Yeah.
So that's going to be interesting.
Oh yeah.
I'll give a point to Venom just for Venom becoming Kool-Aid Man at several points in the movie. That was great. So, yeah, that was it. So, I think that's all for Venom. Let There Be Carnage. It was a movie. 6 out of 10.
It happened.
Yes, it certainly did. 6 out of 10. Anything else you want to throw out there?
No. I was wondering if I should say go watch it, but I think that kind of depends on if he shows up in No Way Home or not.
Yeah, if it depends on, depending on which of the categories we were describing earlier you fall into, just kind of self-sort yourself into one of those categories, and that will determine the answer.
Yeah, you decide for yourself this time. I'm not your boss. I'm not your mother. I don't care what you do. Just if you want to watch it, go watch it. If you don't. But whatever you do, tell us with a comment below and leave a like and subscribe, please.
We can't do all the thinking around here. Sometimes we're happy to provide our.
My brain hurty.
But this one I think comes down to you, the viewer. So, thank you all so much for watching and hanging out with us in this late night Venom review. And yeah, look forward to all of that exciting stuff that we're talking about coming up in the next few weeks and months. It's going to be a huge end of the year. Lots more special episodes, lots more guest episodes. And unfortunately, starting next week, lots more Star Wars. Well, the good news is actually next week we're talking about a good Star Wars thing. So, how about that? A good Star Wars Disney era thing. Miracles do happen.
Who would have thunk it?
I know. A Christmas miracle. And after that, we have a very special Halloween episode planned. So stay tuned for that. That's going to be a lot of fun. And with that, I think that's it. Thank you all so much. We will speak to you again next week with something new. Goodbye.
Good night, everybody.